Well, hello and welcome to Samaritans Purse International Health Forum. We're so excited to have you all with us today. Got a great presentation. As always, I just want to remind you to utilize your chat box at the right of the video. If you could just sign in your name, where you're located, so that we just have a good idea of our listening audience. And also just want to cue you into the chat box at the end of the presentation for a dedication to Q&A. So before we get started, as always, I also just want to open up in a word of prayer. So let us all bow our heads. Dear Heavenly Father, we just thank you for today. Thank you for this amazing opportunity, this digital age, Lord, where we can utilize technology for the sake of the gospel. Thank you for Dr. Cheatham and just the many years of his service here at Samaritans Purse and World Medical Mission. And I just pray that you speak through him today, God, as we provide this presentation, and it's in your name that we pray. Amen. All right. Well, I am just delighted to present and host our speaker today, who will be talking about responding to God's call, sharing the stories. Before I introduce him, though, I just really want to emphasize one of the great aspects of this webinar, Samaritans Purse International Health Forum, is that we really have an opportunity for posterity's sake to capture the history of Samaritans Purse. There are so many people, so many important people like Dr. Cheatham that have paved the way. People like Dr. Richard and Lowell Furman, Ken Isaacs, Mary Lou Fisher, Becky Williams, David Gettle. I could name so many other people that have done foundational work and helped make Samaritans Purse what it is today, all utilizing medicine for the sake of the gospel. And one other person that has made enormous contribution to the history, the medical history here at Samaritans Purse and World Medical Mission, is none other than Dr. Mel Cheatham. And so, Dr. Cheatham, we're just delighted to have you here today. Let me just make a few more comments before we get started and listen to you. For our listening audience, Dr. Cheatham and his wife, Sylvia, they have served here faithfully at Samaritans Purse for 36 years. And in fact, he has served for many of those years on the board of directors at Samaritans Purse, World Medical Mission, and the Billy Graham Association. He also serves as the clinical professor of neurosurgery at UCLA Medical Center in Los Angeles. And he continues to serve in an advisory capacity there at UCLA. He no longer practices surgery and performs surgery and practices medicine, but again, he is a valuable asset to that institution in an advisory role in just the many years that he served there. And Dr. Cheatham, just for the benefit of those on the webinar today, they may not know. And so I would just love for you to start off, if you could, just sharing how God called you to be a physician, in particular, how to be a neurosurgeon. And then in your 50s, God especially called you and Sylvia to the mission field to serve as volunteer medical missionaries on behalf of World Medical Mission. Could you share some of those stories with us?
Thank you, Lance. Yes, Sylvia and I both grew up in Christian homes. And we, for those growing up years, we looked forward to the ways that we might be able to serve the Lord in doing his work. I always wanted to be a physician from the time I was a little boy. I wanted to become a surgeon. I wanted to become a brain surgeon, and I became a neurosurgeon. And it was just amazing how through the many years, the prominence of the story of Dr. Albert Schweitzer, who had gone to the jungle in East Africa to establish a hospital to take care of the needs of people who otherwise would never have received care. That story stayed with me. I'd heard it in Sunday school as a young boy. And however, Dr. Schweitzer's focus was more on the practice of medicine and on caring for people. Than it was on proclaiming the gospel and evangelism. But our lives, my life, Sylvia's life, were so blessed during those early years as we were growing up, and we were blessed then in meeting, falling in love. We've been married 62 years plus a few days. And we raised our three children. We lived our lives very active in the church and in doing the Lord's work. But as the years went by, we began to become more and more aware of hearing God's voice calling upon us, not an audible voice, but we felt he was saying to us, I have blessed you and blessed you and blessed you, but what have you done for me in the living of your lives? And then in 1985, the early months of 1985, before I went off to the operating room for a day at UCLA, Sylvia and I were in the kitchen having a very early breakfast and reading through the LA Times. And I turned on the television set with the remote, not even looking at the screen. And Sylvia said, quick, go back. I think it's Billy Graham. And we went back to the channel in question, but it wasn't Billy Graham. It was a young man with dark hair being interviewed on Christian television. And he kind of looked like a young Billy Graham. And then it flashed on the screen, Franklin Graham. And he was telling about a hospital in Tenwek called Tenwek in East Africa, and the needs to expand this little hospital and needs for medical equipment and supplies. And it really caught our attention.
Well, Mel, I remember, I think I've told you several times just over the years what an impact your book that you wrote, Come Walk With Me, how it really influenced my life and really compelled me to go into medical missions. And in your book, you referenced this story that you just talked about, this TV show that you happened to stumble upon, you and your wife, Sylvia, before you went to work. And on the broadcast back in 1985, Franklin Graham was just reaching out to the listening audience, compelling them that this mission hospital in remote West Africa, or excuse me, Western Kenya, just was in dire need of volunteer medical professionals like yourself. They were in dire need of medical supplies, and it was a very resource restricted and hospital. And I know that opportunity for you just really compelled you and Sylvia to get involved, to respond and go to Tenwek, to get involved with World Medical Mission. On that TV show, I know there was a request by the host, if the listening audience would just send $1, if they would just each send $1, Tenwek Hospital at the time was reaching out in need of money to expand the hospital so that there could be more beds to treat the patients that were without there in Kenya. And also it just gave them opportunity, of course, to present the gospel of the Lord Jesus Christ. I think, Mel, on that TV show, they raised something like $300,000 and were able to very successfully expand the campus there at Tenwek Hospital. But I remember also very well that at the end of that TV show, you and Sylvia just instantly looked at each other and said, yes, we will go.
Yes. The person interviewing Franklin asked him if there was any other need at Tenwek Hospital, and Franklin said they need doctors who will go and serve short-term and help take care of the patients who otherwise will not receive care. And Sylvia and I almost in unison said, yes, we'll go. Yeah. Called the number on the screen, talked to Becky Williams, RN, and told her I was a professor of neurosurgery, and my wife and our three teenage children wanted to go to that hospital and help take care of those people and do so in the Lord's name. And there was kind of a silence, and I thought we'd lost the connection. And I said, hello. And she said, oh, yes, Dr. Cheatham, I'm still here. I don't know if we could use a brain surgeon in that bush hospital in East Africa, located 50 miles from the nearest town of any size. And we were very disappointed because we had been praying about and looking for ways to serve the Lord in missions. But then a call came back from Becky Williams some days or weeks later, and she said, Dr. Cheatham, you know, we have received a request for a professor of neurosurgery willing to go to Presbyterian Medical Center in Jeonju, South Korea, and be interim professor and chairman there while their professor comes back to the US for more training. But we didn't want to go to South Korea. We wanted to go to Tenwek Hospital, and we learned a lesson. The Lord taught us a lesson through this, because I told Becky Williams we would think about it, pray about it in terms of going to where we were needed, and in South Korea. And as the time went by, our family of five were led by the Lord to the realization it's not where you want to go, it's where God wants you to go in terms of being at work in his service. And so we went to South Korea, and our lives were changed. We worked very hard. We learned about the Korean culture, and it's entirely different than cultures in the rest of the world, but learned how to function in that culture, not knowing the plan God had for us some years later in terms of North Korea.
Well, that's exciting. I know that was just all preparation. I don't know exactly why God called you to South Korea first, but I think as you'll later on in the broadcast, you'll talk about where God called you on later on to North Korea. So certainly that seems to make sense. God knows what he's doing much more so than we do. So that's very exciting. And then I think, Mel, later on, if I'm not mistaken, you received another call from Becky Williams to serve yet again after your experience there in South Korea.
Yes, we hadn't been back long, and the telephone rang one morning, and it was Becky Williams calling, and she said, we received good reports about your time, and you see it on the screen, Presbyterian Medical Center, a big university hospital. And we received good reports about your work and that of your family. And we have heard from Tenwek Hospital over in Kenya, and maybe we could use you, maybe they could use you there if you'd be willing to do abdominal surgery, chest surgery, orthopedics, urology, plastic surgery, take care of burn patients, you know, just like real doctors do. And also probably do one or two or three cesarean sections a day. And so we were thrilled. As a family, we wanted to, let's have the next image or so. We're waiting. These photographs taken at Presbyterian Medical Center in Jeonju, South Korea, because this was, and here Sylvia teaching nurses next. So we worked for several months collecting medical equipment and supplies, and our family of five with 18 duffel bags filled with all kinds of donated items, medical items. We flew to Nairobi and then in a small Cessna 206 out to Tenwek. And this is what it was like to land on the grass clearing near Tenwek Hospital up in the Kenyan highlands, 50 miles from the nearest town. People just arrived out of the bush, out of nowhere, it seemed, within minutes of the aircraft landing and surrounded it. The next one, here we are, a family of five at Tenwek Hospital next. And with the chief, and I had done a hysterectomy on his wife 2 or 3 days before. And this was what it was like, as Franklin had described on Jim Baker's program, 2 or 3 patients in each bed and more on the floor underneath. Next. And you'll get some idea from the next 2 or 3 images. That was the little chapel. Sylvia, with no medical training, as she was growing up in London, became my assistant. Notice how few instruments we had to work with. And had to do the anesthesia, do as much as possible under spinal anesthesia. And with Sylvia assisting, and she was a fantastic assistant. Next, please. Doing cesarean sections 2 or 3 times a day or a night, and you're helping one of the young residents who came to spend some time doing major surgery. This was what it was like on Sunday mornings. Those of you who have served in the field over in Kenya, East Africa, other countries like this, you know, people come in large numbers. They had actually built a church building, but it was too small to for all the people who wanted to come. So they would sit in worship that would go on for about 2 or 2.5 hours. And if it started to rain, they would just sit there. Next. This is Tenwek Mission Hospital today. And some of you on this program, this webinar, have served there, and you know what has happened there. These are the residents in multiple training programs, even neurosurgery and cardiac surgery now, and a miracle of the Lord. Some of you may have served in Nkundi. Sylvia and I were in Nkundi many times. Next. And we first met Ken Isaacs in Moscow with Franklin and with Dr. Billy Graham for the School of Evangelism in Moscow in 1991, I think it was. And what a friend, what a brother, and how much we love and admire him. Next, please. And it was Kenny who called one Sunday afternoon and said they need a team willing to come into the middle of the war in Bosnia to operate on the war wounded and set up a neurosurgery department. And we went, 11 of us, some of my doctors and nurse friends from here. Next, please. And this is a Catholic church at Nova Bila. It had been turned into a hospital, packed with people where they used to worship, and they still worshiped there. And this is operating in the basement with Sylvia assisting me and a Croat doctor who couldn't speak English, and I couldn't speak his language, but he was a trained surgeon, and a patient shot in the head by a sniper's bullet. Next. And our team in the sanctuary of that church. And then in Somalia, in Mogadishu, next, this was before Black Hawk Down, and we had military escort. It was a dangerous place to be, and some of you may have been there. Next. But we go where the Lord calls us to go. And here we would set up clinics in Mogadishu, and it would become so dangerous after an hour or two, the UN soldiers would move us someplace else because they had kids even with guns. This is the First Lady of Uganda, a real friend of Franklin and the ministry. And this is at the President of Uganda's home because Franklin and Dr. Graham and the ministries are so highly regarded. Next, please. The president of South Sudan, President Salva Kiir, who came to meet us up in the bush in South Sudan. Next one. And where the North forces in Sudan had blown up or destroyed, I think, 1,000 churches here in Iraq, where Dick Furman and Sammy Dagger and Paul Dagger and I were called to go. The request came from Saddam Hussein, the next one, between the two wars. I show you this because the first morning in Baghdad at the Children's Hospital, before I could get out of the car, this couple shoved this little girl through the open window because it was so hot and humid into my lap. And through the interpreter, I found they wanted to give me their little girl because they heard I was in Baghdad from America, and they knew she was going to die of leukemia, and knew that or felt that if she was taken back home, she could be cured, and she would be Sylvia's child and my child, that she would be given up by them. This in Rwanda, with Australian troops, we were That's the battle for Kigali was being fought. And then afterward, and I spoke in the central prison where they had 10,000 prisoners charged primarily with genocide. The next slide, please. But North Korea. In 1997, I was with Franklin and Jane Austen up in Alaska, and he asked me to go to North Korea on his behalf because he requested to come. And we see these monuments and the like portrayed on television. The next one, please. But here's what it's like in the countryside where they have overplanted, they have not had fertilizers, they have torrential rains and flooding. It's a disaster. They can't feed their people. And Dr. Billy Graham had gone to Pyongyang in 1992, and he went back in 1994. He had met in 1992 with the supreme commander, their quotes God in North Korea, and they embraced each other. And the late great leader said to Dr. Billy Graham, "You and your family are now family with me," because Franklin's mother had gone to school, as you know, in Pyongyang, at the Christian school back in the 1920s when it was there was a great evangelical Christian awakening. Gary Lundstrom, vice president, international vice president of Samaritans Purse, and my brother, he has kept me alive, really, scared off people who would do me harm. And I think he's been to North Korea with me, or we've been there together 24 times maybe. And what a friend, what a servant to the Lord. The next, a Samaritan's Purse mobile TB diagnostic vehicle, Franklin made available with X-ray machine diagnostic equipment inside because they have a pandemic problem of tuberculosis in that country. And a very wealthy friend in the United States underwrote Samaritan's Purse being able to treat patients diagnosed with TB because 75 cents worth of anti-TB medication a day gives a 90% chance of cure. And this is a dental vehicle that Dr. Billy Graham and the BGEA gave. On the left, on the right is one upscale dental vehicle given by Samaritan's Purse, filled with equipment so that dental care can be brought to people in the countryside. And the next one, this breaks my heart every time I see it, because out in the countryside, up in a valley or a glen, they'll have these little wooden sheds, rows and rows of them. And they take patients in North Korea who are diagnosed with tuberculosis and put them out in these sheds in the countryside where the rest of society doesn't see them. And I asked the lady standing waving in that photograph how long she had been in that room with 3 other ladies, 26 years, for lack of 75 cents a day worth of TB treatment medication made available through Samaritan's Purse. Next, a TB hospital, 800 beds, no electricity, no running water, every bed filled. This is what an operating room, what it looked like in that hospital. And here are some more views. The next. How would you like to operate on somebody with that kind of equipment and be afraid the table would collapse? This was their laboratory. And here, the next one, the chief surgeon making rounds with me, every bed filled. And this long thoracotomy scar, they had done that without any light other than reflected from the sun, from one mirror to another and into the wound. Would break your heart. And this in Pyongyang, a radiologist, I think, about to die of leukemia because they lost electric power and or had ran out of X-ray film, and he still had electric power, so he was using an X-ray machine as a fluoroscopic unit powered on himself. And this, the DPRK ambassador to the United Nations in New York, and I would meet with, and Gary usually with me, sometimes Kenny and Ed Morrow, so that in addition to 28 times in North Korea, probably 50 or 60 times in New York, meeting with North Korean ambassadors and officials to the United Nations, everything done in conjunction with our government. Back in Pyongyang, then having high-level protocol missions and with the foreign minister, and here is Franklin on his first of 4 visits to Pyongyang, where he was so highly respected, highly honored. The next one, please. Here, I'm meeting with the foreign minister for a 3-hour protocol session, roughly, to prepare the way for Franklin coming. And here's Franklin being so highly honored and received by the new foreign minister, and a gift being given. And the next shows Franklin as he is shaking hands with the vice president of the Presidium of the Supreme People's Assembly, the number 2 man in rank in North Korea. That kind of relationship in the Lord's service, and made very clear to these folks that through by Franklin and all of us, that we are there doing the work of the Lord. Next. And we were able 1 year to take Operation Christmas Child shoeboxes in and distribute them to children in daycare centers, but they all had to be identical because the North Korean leadership said everybody is equal in our country. Next, Franklin Graham. I can't say enough words of respect and love and admiration for Franklin. What a leader, what a servant of the Lord, called to do they work through Samaritan's Purse, World Medical Mission, Operation Christmas Child, all of these things, and to preach the gospel so powerfully as his father has done through the years, and now will following. Dr. Billy Graham, what a blessing to be with him in Moscow on 2 occasions, and Berlin, and you go through as they were tearing down the Berlin Wall in the East Berlin, and then to hear him stand there with him as he was preaching from the steps of the Reichstag as the Berlin Wall was coming down. The next, Franklin with Bob Pierce, a young Franklin Graham, still a student, and Bob Pierce asking him then to take over this small relief ministry called Samaritan's Purse, and Franklin did so, and then we know what Samaritan's Purse is today, with the of the Lord magnificent abilities and leadership supplied by our brother and friend we love and admire so much, Franklin Graham. And the next one, Dick and Lowell Furman, who heard God's call. Felt called to go to countries where people were dying because they didn't have healthcare delivery, and these 2 brothers, so lovingly having launched World Medical Mission, and then when Franklin Graham came back to Appalachian State University and was president of this very small ministry, Samaritan's Purse, and World Medical Mission, a very small ministry, and they asked him to become president of it. And now look at this new building at Tenwek Mission Hospital. Some of you have served at Tenwek Mission Hospital, others, maybe you saw in some of the photographs I showed earlier, something of the concrete block little buildings, even without electric power when we first went there. And without running water, we had to drink the water and bathe in it out of the river, muddy river water. And to have buildings like this now at Tenwek Mission Hospital, the number 1, I'm sure, the largest mission hospital in Africa, maybe in the world, because of the Lord's leading and because of the response of people who have said, yes, Lord, I'll go, send me. And next, is there another? Yes, there it is. I put this here because what a blessing. What a blessing in the Lord's service that the Lord called Dr. Billy Graham to his crusade ministry, and that he just worked himself unstoppingly for all those years in proclaiming the gospel, and the Graham family and Franklin Graham. And to know Franklin, as all of us on this webinar do, I believe, to know him as a friend, a brother, never once, ever traveling the world with him, being sick with him, being tired with him. I've never once heard him ever say a bad thing about another person, and admired around the world. I'll tell you that in 2014, it may have been, we were in Hong Kong, and 436,000 people heard Franklin preach those crusade messages there. And our prayers go out to Hong Kong and people in that part of the world now. But what a wonderful blessing it is to each one of us to have heard God's call, have responded to God's call, and to be part of Samaritan's Purse and his Medical Arm World Medical Mission and the Greatest Journey. And the story is being told. The important story, of course, is the story of the Lord Jesus Christ and of salvation, of Jesus Christ having come to show the way, to die on the cross for the forgiveness of our sins. And yet there are so many stories. And Lance, that's something I wanted to share in this opportunity to you have given to me today. All of us that have these experiences here at home and around the world, wherever the Lord places us in the ministry, we come back with many stories that are life-changing stories, and I think we need to share those with others.
Mel, if I could, I just wanted to interject here. I just can't imagine the experience that you have had over these 36 years with World Medical Mission and Samaritan's Purse. I'm going to go off script and just say this for emphasis. You know, as we alluded to earlier, when you and Sylvia just happened to stumble on the television show back in 1985, and Franklin was prompting healthcare professionals like yourself to serve, to go and to serve. And you and Sylvia, of course, you prayed, and God, you know, he just nudged your heart and said, go and serve it. And you took that first step of faith, and you called Becky Williams, and she sent you, as you've shared with us, to South Korea and then to Tenwek Hospital. I bet never in your wildest imagination that could you have ever imagined what you were about, the journey that you were about to embark on. Can you just maybe, before you tell us, I think you were going to share with us, and I think we have time certainly for you to share several additional stories. But before you do that, if you could just sort of answer that, if you could just sort of speak into where God took you as you began this journey of faith back in 1985.
Yes, let me first say, life becomes full when you begin to give it away. And in our time, and in the younger generation time now, people are living really two lives. People used to get sick and die, be called home to the Lord when they were in their 50s or 60s. And now, having passed my 88th birthday and still at work, there's so much that all of us can do in the Lord's service, and that will make a difference. And we're seeing these huge numbers of people, like for DART and in other parts of the ministry through Operation Christmas Child, the Greatest Journey, huge numbers of people that say, I want to be part of that.
Yes.
Going to Tenwek, referring back to what you said, I used to be a real doctor before I became a professor of neurosurgery at UCLA, at the number one rated medical center west of the Mississippi River. But I had interned at the University of California, San Francisco. My general surgery training at the University of Kansas. Then I was the general surgeon D level in the Air Force for 2 years on active duty, and then came back for the professorship, for the training in neurosurgery, and was going to become dean of the medical school. But Sylvia heard God's voice, and he called us. You don't know just what his ultimate plan for you might be, but important if you hear his voice to say, yes, Lord, I'll go, send me. And the opportunities for all of us in our generations at work today are so huge, so enormous, and are truly making such a difference. And it's just, it's challenging often, but it's amazing to find yourself really as someone working pretty hard, but really a spectator, seeing God at work and seeing the people around you as servants of the Lord that are doing these amazing things. And Franklin and the younger generation, people like yourself, Lance, carrying on the work that will bring praise, honor, and glory to the name of the Lord. I can quickly share with you, as mentioned to you earlier, let me mention that, having mentioned that we didn't have any running water, had to boil the water out of the river and bathe in the river water at Tenwek, and had no electricity. A couple heard we had been over there. They were our big Presbyterian church in Palm Desert, California. They wanted us to have dinner with them. We had dinner with them, and they said, "Tell us about this Tenwek hospital." And I said, "Well, it's on the bank of a river. We drink the water out of the river and bathe in it for the animals." And they said, whoa, stop. You do that? And Lance, for the rest of the evening, we never got beyond the muddy river water. And we got in bed that night, and Sylvia and I stared at the ceiling because we had failed the Lord in our work of service. But that couple paid for the water processing plant, still at Tenwek Hospital today, that's made such a huge difference. They had read Come Walk With Me. Yeah. They wanted to hear more of the story of Tenwek Hospital. Let me mention also that one evening, and I'll keep this very brief, one evening I had been operating at UCLA. I was in the operating room, and I got a call wanting to know if I would come down to the Calvary Chapel Riverside and bring the message that evening, because the pastor was going to be away, and I had to be back in Ventura to spend the night, and then at UCLA at 7 in the morning. But I went, and after sharing the message that evening, several people lined up to say hello, and the last one in line was a young lady by the name of Cindy Bonsall. And Cindy told me her story. We only talked maybe 5 minutes, and she said, "Do you think there would be any possibility that Franklin Graham could use me back at Samaritan's Purse?" And I said, "Well, why don't you send him a letter and I'll call him?" And she sent the letter, I called, and she now has led the Children's Heart Project around the world. And I think, Lance, you'll know, but I believe the number is up to 142 children who have had open heart surgery. It's just huge.
Yeah, over 1,400. Yes, sir.
1,400.
Yeah.
Wow. And then the third story I want to very quickly mention is back in 1993, after Come Walk With Me had come out, received a call from Boone at Samaritan's Purse, and there was a man in Los Angeles who had received a book, a copy of Come Walk With Me, and the story of Stanley Chabourgay, the one-legged Kipsigis tribesman at Tenwek Hospital. And he wondered if he could meet us. And so we agreed to meet him in Los Angeles at a hotel that evening. Came the closest to being killed, Sylvia and I have ever come, when a carload of kids roared through an intersection on a red light and stopped 10 inches from the driver's side door, we would have been killed, I'm sure. We had dinner with Jim Hodges, this businessman in the Los Angeles area. What a servant of the Lord, what a friend to the ministry he has become, what a friend of Franklin's and Mr. Graham's when he was still in his earthly ministry. And Jim Hodges has traveled the world with Franklin, with us, with others in the ministry. On one occasion, went all the way around the world with Sylvia and me, and I think 10 others, going from one mission hospital to another. And what a friend to the ministry and what a friend of the Lord, Jim Hodges, through Royal Paper Box, his company, in so many ways, and certainly through the Operation Christmas Child shoebox ministry, and really, really prominent in his thoughts and his heart, the greatest journey, making a difference by evangelizing children around the world in large, huge numbers for the time ahead.
Wow. Dr. Cheatham, those stories are amazing. I love listening to your stories. What you've kind of just loosely alluded to, you mentioned, first you mentioned Chuck and Maxine Billman, who of course met with you and were compelled to provide funding for the water filtration plant at Tenwek that's still there today and providing clean water for that hospital that is becoming a premier mission hospital in Kenya and beyond. Also, you shared the story of Cindy Bonzel, who now runs Children's Heart Project that has ministered to children all over the world with congenital heart defects. And as we just mentioned, I believe now has taken care of over 1,400 children in that program. And then lastly, you mentioned Jim Hodges, the gentleman that was compelled after he met you. And the common denominator with all these people, Dr. Cheatham, is that they met you. And I'm just going to advertise your book one more time. Come Walk With Me. I wish I could hold up a copy of the book. I don't have it in front of me, but truthfully, it was one of the most compelling books I ever read. It also inspired me to really join the ranks, if you will, the work here at Samaritans Purse and World Medical Mission and serve. The book really talks about the compelling story of Dr. Cheatham and how he was a young man and called to become a pioneer in neurosurgery and then a pioneer in medical missions. And then, as he mentioned too, it tells this amazingly compelling story about this young Kenyan man named Stanley Chiborge. And the gentleman unfortunately develops a very severe cancer, an osteosarcoma of his leg, and he loses his leg, and eventually he loses his life, but not before dedicating himself, his soul, to Jesus Christ through the ministry of Dr. Cheatham and others there at Tenwek Hospital. If you've never read Come Walk With Me, I urge you to do so. I think it'll change your life, and it will really, again, just compel you to get involved. And Dr. Cheatham, I want to thank you. I'm sure we have some questions. Before we entertain questions, I just really want to emphasize today, I think what's the overarching theme, what you have really shared with us today, and I can share from my own experiences, as you said, and I think your life has really portrayed this. When you die to self, when you give your life to the Lord, He will give back so much more. And it's been amazing to be involved with the ministry here at Samaritan's Purse, to see what God has done in your life. You would have never known in a million years back in 1985 how God would use, you so miraculously. As you humbly alluded to, you said that, God could even use a neurosurgeon. That seems a little backwards, but it is amazing. And it's great to get involved with ministry here. And so we encourage everybody to do that. If I could, I'm going to go to our chat box here and let's see if I'm sure there's some questions here. give me just one second here. Dr. Sawyer says, Dr. Cheatham, your willingness to travel to war-torn and dangerous areas is very admirable. What stirred your heart the most? Excuse me, I lost it here a second. What stirred you the most to have served in these very difficult places like Bosnia, Sudan, Somalia, and Kosovo?
In serving in places like this, I can honestly say, and say on my dear wife Sylvia's behalf, we've never experienced fear. We have always felt the Lord had us where He wanted us to be, and He would take care of us, and He has always faithfully done that. And life becomes full when you begin to give it away, and the friendships, the relationships, the expansion of the ministry, as Franklin I think would say, is so tightly connected to the ministry that has been done through sharing the gospel, but also bringing help to people in their time of need. Let me mention, in reference to that book, Come Walk With Me, that Stanley Shborge was the first patient I operated on at Tenwek Mission Hospital. After arriving there, we became very close friends. What I found, I operated on his spine because he had developed severe back pain after having lost his leg to cancer a few months before, and his spine was riddled with cancer that had spread there. And thinking about the Lord to write the book, Come Walk With Me, it has it's been read by many people around the world. I just want to mention that it is a book that is Samaritans Person's book, and World Medical Mission's book, and it's not one that I receive money from. I can share one more story with you in the time, if it's okay.
Yes, we have 10 or 15 more minutes. Take your time.
In September of 2019, before COVID, when we had our last BGEA and Samaritans Purse World Medical Mission Board and committee members meeting in Orlando in conjunction with the disaster relief conference, where there were 1,400 in attendance, people doing dark work. After having the Samaritans Purse and the BGEA board meetings, and then the World Medical Mission Committee meeting, Sylvia and I and son Michael, who's on those boards, in our suits, we were making our way down to the ballroom where those 1,400 or so servants of the Lord were already meeting. And a gentleman came toward us out in the hotel hallway, and he was wearing blue jeans and a t-shirt and his name badge around his neck. And he said, "Excuse me, could I say hello to you? I noticed from the badges you have around your necks that you're on the Billy Graham and the Samaritan's Purse boards." And he said, "I'd like to tell you my story." And we, of course, said, "I'd love to hear your story, sir." He said, "My wife and I have been married many years. I retired several years ago, and we sat there in our nice home and kind of listening to the clock tick and watching television, and one day after another. And then we had television on, and we heard about Samaritan's Purse and World Medical Mission, and about the disaster relief team work that you do. And so we prayed about that. We felt called to get involved. He said, ended up that now my wife and I, we sold our house because we didn't need a big house. We're living in a motor home. we have our bags packed so we can be on the road. If there's a hurricane or a disaster of some kind, we can be on the road within 2 hours, even in the middle of the night. And we spend about 58% of our time now at work in the Lord's service, wherever the hurricane, the earthquake, the flood, the fire, the disaster might be, reaching out with the helping hand to people in need in their time of need and loss, and sharing with them the gospel of the Lord Jesus Christ. And I think that is so powerful to see what God is doing through these ministries and through BGEA, and it just grows and grows. And the number of people out there at work all around the world, so many of them volunteers, and with more lined up wanting to become part of this. It's just amazing, Vance. It's just amazing, isn't it?
It truly is amazing. And there's so many stories that we could share, Dr. Cheatham. Ironically, this weekend, my family and I, we were hiking at Linville Gorge here in North Carolina. And lo and behold, who do we run into but Cindy Bonzel, the director of Children's Heart Project. And so we were able to enjoy the day with her. And she's read your book, Come Walk With Me. And she also comments that you've, of course, written other books. She said, truly inspirational as well as living a life that counts. So we want to highlight that book too. Thank you, Cindy, for sharing that. We have a number of people that just are complimenting you for what you've shared today. Skip Roy, he's a physical therapist. He was one of my first bosses, as a matter of fact, in Raleigh. He says, available on Amazon and Kindle is an edition less than $3 for Come Walk With Me. Let's see. Give me just one moment here. At Samaritan's Purse, we have the principle of God Room, coined by Bob Pierce. When is a time, Dr. Cheatham, when you have seen God Room at work in your ministry?
We've just seen it repeatedly. Lance, it's been a matter, if Sylvia was here with me, I know she would agree that as we've been so blessed in being so many places in the world and around the world, we have felt, although we've worked very hard, but we have felt we were kind of there as spectators, seeing God at work. And in amazing ways, like what we've seen happen in Bosnia after the world and after the war, and what we've seen so many places. And for those of us at middle-aged or early middle-aged or are just plain getting older, I think the Lord blesses us through work in His service by making sure that we know what really is important in life. And in doing work as volunteers, we've always done it as volunteers, never as employees. But I should add it as a final comment, because Franklin is a brother, a dear friend, someone we love and admire and respect more than we can express. But Franklin, back 35 years ago, said, Mel, Sylvia, if you're willing to go out as volunteers and do all of this, I just feel like we ought to pay you something. And I said, well, no, Franklin, we don't need that. The Lord just blesses us beyond any work we ever do. He said, well, I understand that. But he said, how about if we have an agreement that I'll give you $1 a year for the work that you do. And so we never worry about things of this life, because if times really get tough, we know we've got 35, it's soon going to be $36 that we can fall back on. But
you're getting wealthy.
Yeah.
Dr. Cheatham, Dr. Bruce Steppies, who has also done so much instrumental work in the PACS program, the Pan-African Academy of Christian Surgeons, he just wanted to express his appreciation to you. As you will well remember, you and Sylvia chaperoned he and his young bride on their honeymoon while they traveled the world together. the exposure to missions changed our lives forever. So Dr. Steffes thanks you immensely for that. Dr. Cheatham, we have time for just one more question, I believe. Skip Roy, he just asked, what advice would you give to us who are entering the winter of our lives, us older folks?
Can you repeat that last? It broke up the last sentence.
He said, Dr. Cheatham, what advice would you share with us older folks that are entering the winter of our lives? What advice would you give older folks in terms of medical mission work?
I would give the advice to stay current, to even though physically or because of age, maybe not being able to be at work in the field, to be a prayer partner, to stay current with what's going on, to be supportive in whatever way possible through local churches and through other friends, because and then to be still and listen for God's voice. Not an audible voice, but we truly believe that God speaks to us in amazing ways, and it's truly amazing. I know you know this, Lance. Some of the ways that people who physically or because of age or whatever handicaps, they can't be out there in the trenches, but they're doing what they can in other ways to be at work in the Lord's service. And I'll just leave this final thought with you. A meeting with someone who has done a motion picture about the invasion of Normandy experience and has been there for the last 25 years for the celebration of the invasion of Normandy site. There is a lady in St. Mary Glees who was there when the troops landed, and she has spent all of these years writing notes and letters to the families of those buried in the cemeteries in Normandy, with the expression of God's presence, God's love, and encouragement, so that there's something that every one of us can do. We just need to go to God in prayer and say, Lord, what would you have me do? I'm yours. Lead me, please.
Well, Dr. Cheatham, we cannot thank you enough for just the foundation that you've laid here at World Medical Mission and Samaritans Purse. And there's so many people on this webinar today that have left thank yous. One of them included, I must share, is a physician by the name of Dr. Michael Cheatham, who is the head of trauma surgery at Orlando Health. Of course, he's your son, and he thanks you, as we all do, for the amazing work and testimony that you have done. So just thank you from the bottom of our hearts. So with that, I want to just close. I just want to advertise prescription for renewal. It will be occurring, of course, in Orlando, Florida, in September 16th through 19th. It's going to be an amazing opportunity to network with so many like-minded medical missionaries and disaster response person. And so I just really encourage you to sign up for PFR September 16th through 19th. You will not be disappointed. Just a reminder that you will be receiving a copy of this webinar today. Of course, CME is associated with that. And so we encourage you to complete that CME credit. Also, we will be hosting our next Samaritans Purse International Health Forum next month, Wednesday, July 14th. And it just so happens to be Dr. Russ White, who is the head of the cardiothoracic initiative at Tenwek Hospital. You won't want to miss that. So please join us Wednesday, July 14th at 12 noon Eastern Standard Time. With that, we thank you sincerely for joining us today. Have a great day and God bless.